What if the things that you consider to be flaws or that other people have told you are flaws or shortcomings that you may have could actually be the things that are not only your superpowers, but are unique and are what make you stand out among the rest? This episode is dedicated to one of the most influential women in my entire life who unfortunately passed away a couple days ago. And it's been, a hard week for my family. But I am happy today because I'm thinking about her, thinking about my grandmother, my father's mother, Anne Siegersma. This is for her because out of all of the people in my life, she was the most 100% authentic to herself that I can possibly remember ever coming in contact with, right? I have never met somebody who was so firm in who they are and didn't give a rip about what anyone else thought about it. And it just made me think, looking at her life and how she lived her life and how she inspired me by being so bold and brave and daring and authentic and so fiery. It made me realize, there are a lot of things that people criticized her for over the years. She's very unfiltered, right? She just says whatever's on her mind. And sometimes that was not appropriate in certain situations, or people considered it not to be appropriate. Sometimes she might have been considered to be stubborn, right? Um, she said some wild stuff. She liked to move around a lot and buy stuff and get rid of it, buy stuff and get rid of it. And to other people, those were flaws. To other people, those were things she should change and fix. But since she's passed, all of the messages I've been getting from other family members and people that knew her, of course, they're all positive. But it's interesting because they are the very things that others criticized her about eh, that they're now flipping in to be positive. So, for example, her being unfiltered and just saying whatever she wanted, being such a negative thing, is now being talked about as being brave and bold and outspoken and being a firecracker and always being entertaining, and just being the life of the party, really. Those are the messages I'm getting from people. She was such a character. She was so much fun. And these were all things that were criticized. And it just got me thinking, what if that's true for all of us? Now, I don't mean that if you have certain critiques that you're getting that could be helpful if you addressed, I don't mean change necessarily, but they could be helpful for you to look at, observe, and maybe adjust in certain situations. I'm not saying that you should never take critique or criticism and evaluate it. Absolutely, you should. But what if you don't have to change yourself? And in fact, I would dare to say that you should never change yourself. Change your behavior, sure. Change your habits, your thought patterns, how you treat yourself and others, absolutely. If my grandmother said something that was not so nice to someone, right, or if she behaved in a way that was just not the kindest. Of course, that's something that we would have said like, hey, you need to chill out. But not, hey, you need to be a different person and stop being honest and stop being upfront with people or stop being, so much. You're just too much. Like, no, that's not the conversation. The conversation is, hey, there are times where we might need to think, where am I? Who am I talking to? You don't talk to a little kid in the same way that you talk to one of your colleagues or peers. But the point is, what if the things that everyone says are flaws that you need to change could actually be what make you unique? I thought about this a lot over the last few days. And, another thing that people would say about her was that she was so focused on the fact that family doesn't come visit enough, and everyone would get frustrated with her. Why don't you just be grateful for the community of people that you do have around you, for the family that is visiting you regularly? Like, be grateful. And I agreed with that. I said, sure, she should definitely focus more on what she does have and not be upset that this person, that person is not visiting. But the fact that she cared so much about her family, the fact that she really valued spending time with people in her family is a beautiful thing. And it is something that was instilled in my dad and is instilled in me now, thanks to my dad and my grandmother, that family is so important. And when I say family, I don't mean it has to be your blood family, right? Family being the people who care for you, who are there for you, who help provide for you in some way, emotionally, right? Physically, taking care of physical needs, whatever it may be. That's your family, right? But that focus on the value of family, caring for others, and making time for each other and showing up for each other. She would come to your great uncles, nieces, cousins, best friends, twice removed, who knows, their kid's football game. If she knew that there was some tiny little connection of family, no matter how distant the relative was, she would travel an hour, 2 hours in her 70s. She was over 80 when she passed this week. But all the way up until this year, she was still driving, right? Everybody was a little concerned about her driving, but she was still driving, and she would drive hours to go to a football game of a kid that barely knew who she was, maybe didn't even know who she was, and the mom or dad would have to be like, "Oh, this is, so and so's cousin's sister's, like, I don't even really remember how we're related, but we are related somehow." It was just so cool to see how much she valued family. But again, something that was seen in a negative light so often. It's just really interesting to me. And I started thinking, of course, and I had to make it about me. So I started thinking, well, what are my flaws, right? That I could maybe see as superpowers. And I had this conversation in my Dreamweaver Academy group yesterday about flaws. Everyone was talking about how, they need to adjust certain things. I was talking to voice actors. To not sound so, one guy comes from a radio background, a live announce background, and he said to not sound so, commercial live announcer because they want more natural conversational reads nowadays. And I said, I get that. That is something that you want to address and work on, being able to shift when it's appropriate, right? Being able to shift into a little bit of a different tone when it's called for, but not leaving behind the style, the personality, the sound that you have, because it's unique. And there are plenty of people who still like that and still want that sound. So don't get rid of who you are. Just know that there are certain times where you don't need to change yourself, but you may need to evaluate how you can balance things out a little bit, right? So if you're loud and proud and crazy and obnoxious and you go into a library, I'm not saying don't be yourself, but if they're like, hey, this is like a really chill, calm environment, still be you. Just, maybe don't laugh and scream at the top of your lungs. It's finding a balance. And I thought about it for me when I started acting. I was coming from a music background. I was coming from nearly two decades of performing as a singer, right? Being on stage, basically. And while singing certainly helped me with certain aspects of acting, being comfortable performing, being comfortable being on camera, being in front of people, speaking lines, I still get nervous, but I'm much further ahead in terms of that experience than someone who's never done any performing, right? But the comment I would get over and over and over when I started acting classes was, stop performing. You're performing too much. You're putting on a show. I need you to stop being a showman. I'm like, but this is like what I've learned, what I've been practicing for nearly 20 years, is performing. Not like I was being fake when I would be on stage as a musician, a different person. No, it's still me, but of course there's an aspect of performing. When I speak slightly different, not because I'm putting on a voice, right? If I wanted to speak absolutely professional and corporate, like a commercial, I can absolutely do that. That's not how I'm speaking to you now. But sure, there is a slight difference in the presentation. in comparison to if you were sitting next to me and we were having a beer and just like hanging out, right? Just a slight difference. Um, but they kept saying that over and over again. And I took that comment. And at first I'm like, okay, I guess I have to like kind of erase everything that I've been doing and, really not water myself. Well, actually, yeah, kind of water myself down, become more grounded, more natural. You need to be more natural. That's what I kept hearing when I would do acting stuff for voice acting. So I tried to change myself at first. And to a point, it worked. They were like, yeah, it's much more grounded, much more like it feels like you're actually living the scene and you're not acting. To a point, it did help. But then I got to this other point in time just a few months ago where when I was doing commercial reads, I started to get a comment in the other direction. It just feels very dry. It doesn't really feel like the same personality that's talking to me in the conversation before you start reading the script. Like, where is you? Where is the Miranda? Like, bring that back in. And I'm like, okay, so now I'm not enough of myself when before I was too much of myself, right? What do you want? But what I realized was I was busy trying to change an aspect of myself rather than seeing how I could balance it out more and use it, play it up to my, benefit at certain times, and then balance it out a little bit more, not water it down, but just make adjustments and shift how I'm presenting it in other situations. So I started bringing my normal personality back into my reads, right? And kind of found a nice little balance where I'm still bringing the amount of conversational, right, natural speaking in these voice acting commercials that they asked for, but also still bringing in like my sass, my kind of over the top personality just enough to where it's still me. And I've been getting booked more. I've been getting shortlisted more. I've been getting better feedback in acting classes. Like, yes, I don't know what you did, but you kind of leveled up. And lately you've been really killing it. And I'm like, yeah, okay. I've found the balance between who I am and how I can present that in a way that is beneficial in each situation. And this at first was hard to understand because it feels like, oh, you're just being a chameleon then. You're just, changing yourself depending on who you're talking to. But it's not that. It's not about changing yourself. My grandmother she definitely never changed herself. And I don't think that she should have. It was more about, again, just understanding where you are, who you're talking to, what the situation is, and using your intuition to discern how to move forward, how to present yourself, right? I think that's a really interesting tap dance that we, especially as creative entrepreneurs, have to do. How do I bring my personality in and be myself 100%? But how do I also do it in a way that is not relatable? That's not the right word. In a way that connects with others, right? Again, how you talk to a little child is not exactly the same way that you would talk to your best friend or an elder, right? So yeah, I just thought that was really interesting. And I thought maybe some of you might benefit from hearing that some of the weird quirks that you have, whether it is something like being over the top, being unfiltered, kind of crazy to some people, or if it's something that's more of a physical thing, or you have an impediment, right? You have a speech impediment that other people would call a disability or something that, limits you in some way. What if it doesn't have to? What if it could be what makes you really unique? It's all in how you look at it and the light that you decide to see it in. So I would encourage you to be more yourself and, you know, find somebody in your life that inspires you, but maybe also triggers people, right? Someone who's controversial, and study that person and maybe evaluate, what things are people quick to judge about this person that actually might be making them really unique. And this is why controversial celebrities, politicians, whatever, are so popular. Part of it's because they're entertaining, right? But the other part is because the polarity is so fascinating and it draws people. It's magnetic, right? And I'm not telling you that you should be extreme in any area, but it is interesting to see that that always takes off. You have all these talented people who skill-wise are way up here, and then you have someone over here who maybe is not even anywhere near that talent level, but they're so fiercely unique, not because they're a special unicorn, but because they are authentic and they decide to stand firm in who they are, like my grandmother always did. It's interesting. Just some food for thought for today and something that I really wanted to share to dedicate to my wonderful grandmother, who is, I'm sure, enjoying herself now wherever she is and having the time of her life, entertaining people. She traveled the world. I mean, literally, she traveled the world multiple times. This woman rode Harley Davidsons well into her senior years. She was a badass. Just to put it bluntly, she was a bad mother lover. And obviously, we miss her very much, but her legacy will live on forever. And that just reminds me that I want to have a legacy that lives on forever. And your legacy is so little about the things that you do. Yes, people will celebrate you for the awards and the things that you accomplish. Like, that's great. It's absolutely a part of life. We want to accomplish goals. I have many goals I want to reach. And it's nice when people recognize you. Yay, you did it. That's great. But your legacy is so much more about how you made people feel, not in a people-pleasing sense, right? Not in a way of trying to make people like you or to be palatable, but in the way of how you affected them in a positive way. That's your legacy, or a negative way. But obviously, we're here to hopefully affect people and inspire people in a positive direction. So you get to choose if your flaws are truly flaws or if they are things that can absolutely be your superpower and make you even more unique than you already are. So you choose. And please send love to the whole family if you don't mind during this time. I wasn't even going to make a video this week, but after a lot of tears, I started to feel inspired. And, there's that other side to grieving and pain and sadness that is beautiful. It's weird. It's a strange beauty on the underside, or the flip side rather, of pain and sadness, right? And despair, grief. It's kind of interesting. I think that's where a lot of art is made, is in that strange kind of contrasting state of being, right? I feel sad, but I also feel so grateful to feel so alive, right? Intense emotion makes you feel really alive. And if I'm sad, it must be because I really cared about someone, right? If I no longer get to see this person face to face and it makes me sad, that must mean that I cared about them. How beautiful is it that I get to experience love? They said it's better to have loved and lost than to never experience love at all. And I think that's absolutely true. Ideally, we never lose anything, right? But it's better to be able to experience love. And yes, it hurts when, we lose people, we lose things in our lives, but it reminds us that we had the opportunity to feel something so deeply. So anyways, I'm going to stop rambling now. Love you guys, and I will see you next time.